Hey, Brass Facts here. Today we're going to be looking at the 3E AVCI. AVCI, it's a dual prism optic that swaps from 1 to 4x by switching between two separate optics on a lazy Susan in a tube with an external zeroing mechanism. We've seen this before. It's an Elcan from Turkey. It's the Turcan. Some of you might already be trying to buy one of these on that premise alone. Everyone wants an Elcan? Yes, everyone. No one wants to pay the Elcan price tag though. Small issue though, you can't actually buy one.
Me and a group of two other people liked the Elcan so much we were willing to import Elcan from Turkey for $1,400 or so a pop, including the optic on top. One of those three was Delta 34. Shameless plug for a friend of mine. Go check out the Delta 34 channel. He has extremely detailed information on zeroing, ACOGs, and a lot of zeroing. He also might have a video coming up about an Elcan in the future. We'll see if I'm still a friend with him after that release. Regardless, I'm going to kind of just review this thing anyway, because as far as I can tell, the company that makes this thing actually wants to produce it in the United States. So we'll kind of go through the product, see how it holds up, see what the features are like, and see if this is something we would be willing to spend $1,000, $1,200, or $1,400 on. Because once again, while we paid $1,400 on, that was to bring 3 into the country, and we have no idea what the end price is going to be like.
The Turcan is clearly kind of a ripoff of the Canadian Elcan, the Can. If I had to guess, they imported a real one and then they reversed engineered the parts they liked. Which, don't get me wrong, if I can get a half-off Elcan, I'll dabble into some selective bias when it comes to patent law, which I think the patent has expired on the Elcan anyway, but don't quote me on that. Regardless, let's look it over. Zeroing is done in a near identical fashion to the real deal. Rotation on the bottom to tilt the optic up or down, elevation, and a forward screw that migrates the optic left and right, for windage. To switch between magnifications, we have a throw lever. However, it honestly seems to be a better iteration of the Maplecan, with the prism housing rotating on the Y-axis. Up if you're watching, that's up and down. With a very impressive detent between the 1 and 4x position. The original is more of a spring-loaded sort of deal, with the final position kind of just occurring as the lever maxes out physically against the stop. So in theory, the 1x position can be offset by a pretty noticeable margin if something gets in the way of the lever. Has this ever happened to anyone? Probably not. Is it frustrating to be worried about after having spent almost $2,000 on a brick with ocular lenses? Yeah, so it's cool that it's actually improved here. The mounting interface is basically an American Defense Manufacturing type QD lever mount. Rotate the lever until it's tight, slide the locker in, and you're off to the races. On the opposite side, there is a rotating dial to adjust the tightness. A point to note here, it might seem tight, but I would recommend tightening this all the way to the point where you can't close the lever, and then back it off a tiny bit right up until you can. That's a good practice with everything here, but on this one especially, it seems to want to rattle itself loose, and the other two Turcans in the USA triplet didn't do that, and as a result, the units basically unzeroed themselves. The QD lever needs to be very, very tight. As we pan upward, we're greeted with tube. Soft buttons on the side for illumination adjust, which honestly, they sort of suck, but whatever, the illumination on this thing isn't like the original, it's more of just, low light, failing light, CQB, whatever. Not something you're going to be fiddling with all that often. It does have an auto off feature, so you can kind of just turn it on, use it, and then deal with it. On top, we have a sort of knockoff Exoptic RDO6. That's the optic that ships with the original Elcan. Okay, it's slightly different here. The Turkish one has a Delta Point Pro style battery housing in the optic itself, but man, does it look strikingly similar. Like the original X optic, it's also not a very good red dot sight, poor lens shape for durability, doesn't get bright enough, and doesn't work with night vision. So honestly, 10 out of 10 imitating that original, but 3 out of 10 for being an actually good optic. Losing your dot has a whole new meaning with mine. Due to an improperly placed emitter, you can only view maybe the upper 3/5 of the glass, and then it vanishes on the lower field of view. Fortunately, I was able to check with the others in the triplet, and those seem to have no issues, so just mine. For the company, if they ever decide to import these, here's a tip. The X-Optic red dot sight that comes with the real Elcan is considered universally a piece of shit. Everyone throws theirs in the trash or on whatever market of choice. I'd recommend you guys do the same. It adds a lot of cost to the unit without improving it in the slightest. Just include the piggyback mount with it so we can mount our own stuff, and if possible, make the piggyback mount in something other than the doctor pattern. I know, Europe likes the doctor pattern. Here in the US, almost nothing is in that pattern anymore.
Hey, this video is sponsored by this thing, waffle toppers from Venture Surplus. The seasons are getting cold, real cold, and the easiest way you can tell when someone is not prepared to handle the cold is the lack of thermal layering. Right now, this is being used as an outer layer. I have a shirt underneath, and it works kind of as a great sweater. However, if I want to, I can get rid of the shirt and wear this as my bottom layer and kind of have an effective thermal layer shirt hybrid that kind of not only keeps you warm, but ends up kind of wicking off sweat and other things as well due to the technology of, well, you named it the waffle grid pattern. Or something, I don't know, I just wear the thing and it works kind of well. Right now, Venture Surplus has got a bunch of these in stock for pretty decent pricing. So if you want to stock up on some thermal layers, well, I've already given you the whole spiel. Go to Venture Surplus and buy one of these. All right, back to your featured programming.
All right, let's get to the guts. How is the optic itself? Well, first off, we're greeted by an eerily but no longer surprising value brand Elcan reticle. Except, unlike the value brands, Raytheon, please forgive me here, I think it's actually better than the original. Shit, there goes my military industrial sponsorship. It looks like they took basically the same reticle from the Elcan and dialed the font size from 18 down to like 12, which works out quite well because the original is really bulky, and here it's much nicer, I think. The thinner design really shines past around 200 yards, where the 2x4 size Stadia lines from my beloved Maple can tend to just be a bit thick on target. And this also has a lot more air around the center aiming point, making really fine aiming just a lot easier. Unfortunately, I was not able to check if the ranging features on this thing worked, but if they did, we have the standard, shoulder horizontal Stadia lines at the, corresponding marks, and the height indicators at, the bottom left-hand corner. Unfortunately, the 1X is kind of The image itself is quite flat, smooth. You whip this guy out, use it indoors, and it'll look fucking great. Except, wait a minute, LPVO should not look good indoors. And sure enough, you take it outdoors, and once again, while the image is very flat, it's distinctly not 1X. In fact, it's actually less than 1X, which is why it looks so good indoors. I did a lot of number 1, number 3, number 1, and again number 3 eye doctor stuff, trying to figure out what exactly the issue is, and perhaps I need to send this to CDOS. He does a much better job at quantifying optical clarity than I. But either the image is over-focused, as in this thing kind of needs a diopter, or the image is not a 1X, it's like a 0.95 or something like that. Anyway, the point is, your eyes, or at least my eyes, are going to be somewhat annoyed trying to collimate two distinctly different images. This is going to be annoying in the day when you're shooting fast at small targets, and pure suffering in failing light conditions as you shoot at, anything here. Bummer. Flipping over to the 4X, it's fine. Actually, good even. Perhaps a hair worse than the clarity on the Elcan, but really hard to tell a difference on raw clarity and image alone. Reference the CDOS comment. Both of them have that ACOG-esque experience where you have a very wide field of view due to a huge rear ocular, a very large apparent field of view. That is how much the image takes up in your visual horizon. Because both the real deal and this are bricks, you also get the patented Elcan experience of ultra-thick walls on the sides, aka the opposite of a vanishing bezel. Like the OG, we get about 3 inches, slightly less than 3 inches of eye relief. I think that about covers it. Unfortunately, the one area where they didn't make the Elcan was the mount. 2 seconds, almost literally 2 seconds into owning this thing, while I was mounting it to a gun on the back of my car, I set it down and it fell off of the trunk into the dirt with the QD lever extended. That's like, 1 foot, 2 feet off of my rear trunk and hit the desert sand, which sheared off the plastic mounting interface, or at least a component of it. As you can see, I was able to kind of finagle the piece back on and sort of clamp it down with the rail to prevent it from going anywhere. But if I, say I lost this piece or broke in such a manner that I couldn't, set it back in, the optic would have been dead. That chunk of plastic is what the lever presses against, so without it, I can't, use the mount. Editing Brock here. Yeah, so when I tossed the optic here, Yeah, that piece came off and I lost it. It's gone now. It's returned to nature, never to be seen again. So I can't actually use this optic or mount it to anything now. I might try to 3D print something, who knows. Good job, Brock. So, yeah, ooh, that's a rough one. So if there was if they're watching this, second recommendations, this needs to be metal. This is by far the biggest failure point on plastic laser aiming modules in the market. Let's not try to imitate that with an optic. Make this metal. There's a second issue, unfortunately, and this one's is a deal breaker. The optic doesn't hold zero.
So how did this exactly happen? Well, at first I was using the optic in a, typical fashion, and I noticed that my laser was not aligning with the optic, which is a quick and dirty way to confirm if you have or have not lost zero. And it was clear one of the two, the laser or the optic, had lost zero. I was using the MDRX, so I was pretty sure it was the MDRX. But on closer inspection, no, it's actually the optic that seemed to have lost zero in some form or another. Maybe the plastic mounting interface, because mine's cracked, was shifting around. But I did confirm that the optic was moving as I was manually pushing it around. Fortunately, we have two others of these bad boys in the United States, so we checked with the sibling one of this, Delta 34's one, and if we look at the footage, yeah, turns out the optic seems to shift. Now, what exactly is going on here? Like with the Elcan, this thing is zeroed externally. What that functionally means is the optic is sort of free floating, kind of pinned in the place at the front and held down by very strong spring tension in the back. And then, the dial kind of pushes it up or down, and we get how the Elcan and this thing is zeroed. When you pull on the Elcan, you can actually physically move the Elcan every single time, and obviously that moves the optic. But it always returns back to its original position. Yes, I've tested this time and time again. Turns out with the Turcan, that doesn't seem to be the case. You can physically move it and you can feel it. And when we put it on arrival, well, it doesn't seem to return exactly to the same spot every time. And there is noticeable shift.
That's really about that. If you want to support endeavors like this where I light for... psych, the video doesn't end here. 3E saw the finished video, as you have right up until about 5 seconds ago, and they basically said all the issues I had were basically impossible. So I delayed the video release and had the third model, remember we imported 3 of these, to ship to my house for basic testing. That would constitute all 3 models that come into the United States.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, let's jam.
Okay, let's speed run this. The third model is functionally a brand spanking new unit, no hard use yet, straight out of the box. First off, the 1X. It's not nearly as bad as the first 2 that we had, but that might also be placebo. Once again, a bunch of LPVOs have worse 1Xs than this, but 3E very much insisted that my results with the 1X were not correct. It's either over-focused or it's not a true 1X. Take your pick. Here's a PLXE for comparison. Next up, holding zero. Ah man, I really prayed here that we just got 2 lemons. I really want this thing to work, as I keep saying, but nope. It has the same play issue that number 1 and number 2 has. It seems to be able to shift quite easily windage-wise if you put any pressure onto it. With this one, I did not confirm if it reset back to its original position under recoil, but given that the first 2 under recoil would not reset to their original position, they would stay locked in their new point of impact shift, I'm going to go on a limb here and say that's not the case here. Next up, the mount self-destructing under near zero force if the gate is left open and falls off of the rifle. Yep. Yeah, I think that answers that. This represented 3 chances. I think I've done my fair share here. There is some issues with the AVCI 3E AVCI, whatever. I think the only thing up to interpretation would perhaps be the 1X-ness of the optic. 1X, all magnification in fact, has some degree of subjectivity. The other 2 issues are, to me, deal breakers and are demonstrably proven. Upside of this whole dilemma, this whole situation, is that 3E seems to be actively tinkering with the current design, trying to make it better. I've already seen some CAD designs where they're already working on better mounts, better designs, and well, hopefully we will result in ultimately the best product coming to the United States that they possibly confront. So I gotta say, props on that front at least. Okay, I'll keep you guys in the loop on how the Gen 2 ends up, but yeah, that's right about that. If you want to support endeavors like this, well, consider supporting the channel. A great way to support the channel is to purchase from my sponsors, be it the ammo company Eclipse Armory or Venture Surplus, the, surplus companies. I don't get kickbacks when you order from them, when you use my the discount codes. They are literally just discount codes. But it does let them know, I'm sending people their way, and it makes it show that I'm giving them value added in the relationship, and thus they're willing to continue sponsoring me, and that actually helps fund the channel. Usual advertisement stuff. Beyond that, the usual YouTube bullshit you've heard a million times. I won't bore you with it. All right, let me cheer you up with some dog footage. Later, guys.
It's time for your doctor's appointment.
Oh, good reflexes, Nova. Nice and healthy. Yeah. Look at that. Say hi to the camera. Hi. Hi.
The tasteful thickness. Meaty. Only the tail works right now. Isn't that right, Nova?